Hi, I'm Jim Knotts, President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Welcome to today's virtual reading of the names. 2022 marks the 40th anniversary of the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. As part of our commemoration, we'll host an in-person reading of the names at the wall from November 7th through 10th, 2022, when all 58,281 names on the wall will be read aloud. In the lead up to that event, we'll be reading names each day online while sharing the photos of these heroes. For our daily virtual reading, the names of the service members will be read by month and day of death between the years 1956 and 1975 in alphabetical order for the given day. We apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. Know that our readers are doing their best to honor these service members. We hope you'll listen and watch each day and share with others as we remember and honor those who gave their lives during the Vietnam War.
Stephen Jack Adams, Ronnie Darnell Adcox, Daniel Aguilera, Homer Lee Ake Jr., Charles Byron Allant, Jasper Marion Alexander, William Franklin Alsman, Raul Alvarado Jr., Lynn Dennis Anderson, Charles Richard Anderson, Michael Eugene Angel, Melvin Lynn Applebury, Larry Dwayne Aaronholt, Galen Leroy Arsenault, Howard Harrell Ashford, Philip Lou Baker, Charles Herman Bennett, Billy Howard Best, George Michael Binns, Richard Lee Borgman, Andrew Richard Broussard, Frank Lester Brown, Aubrey Sean Brown, Paul Douglas Brummett, Paul Joseph Buzelich, James Carl Burks, Fred Douglas Burton, James Edward Burton Jr., Kenneth Allen Buys, Clyde Joseph Cares, Wellborn A. Callahan Jr., William Ladd Campbell, Robert John Campbell, David Arthur Carley, Melvin Carrillo, Ronald Jerome Dent Casper, Michael Lane Charles, Dan Eugene Charles, Ronald F. Christensen, Charles Frederick Coyner, Donald Ray Koldberg, Dennis Joseph Call, Abraham Lincoln Colon Perez, George Kalunga, Paul Donald Cook, Philip Marvin Cruz, Harold Edward Crowder, Paul William Curran, James Michael Darby, Vincent Anthony Detena, Joseph Nicholas Decker, Kenneth Samuel D., Frank Robert Dimmitt, Albert Royce Dismuke, Edward Dean Dyson, Jesse James Dixon, Michael John Drake, Ori John Double Jr., Ronald Dwight Ducker, Roy Raymond Dukes, James Edward Duncan, Michael Leo Ebald, Calvin Edmonds, Edwin Ray Edwards,
Austin Ivan Edwards, Michael England, Michael J. Ferris, Ernest Eugene Fox, Robert Fletcher Fieldler, Charlie Fields, Walter Joseph Fitzpatrick, Roger Dennis Force, John Daniel Forshee, Norman Archie Fawcett, Francisco Franco, Robert Thomas Freed, Martin Lee Freeman, Joseph Lloyd Freeman, Jr., Melvin Clyde Gaines, Edward Lee Garcia, Jackie Wayne Garner, Earl Stanley Garrison, Lawrence Leonard Gasca, Richard Samuel Gender, Robert Earl Goding, Rupert Watson Goebel, Jr., Anthony Golson, Raymond Ray Goodwin, Glenn Raymond Gordon, Jeffrey Kenneth Goss, Larry Ronald Gordine, Moses Green, Paul Harrison Green, Robert Elwin Griffith, Danny Dean Hanks, Harry Todd Harrison, Samuel Nicholas Hart, Moses Haywood Jr., John Lewis Heiser, Tommy Ray Henderson, Larry Dean Hessen, Stephen Murdoch Hickman, Manuel Higuera, Harold Holmes, Barry DeVere Horton, Willie Jr. Hudson, Dennis Ross Paul Isom, Ricky Lynn James, James Dean Johnson, John Henry Johnson Jr., David Allen Johnston, Lawrence Edward Jones, Edwin Jones, William Jones Jr., William Arlen Jordan, Victor A. Justiniano Jr., James Michael Coulter, Kenneth Harvey Kahneman, George Jeffrey Carr, Neil Scott Kendall, Kenneth Ross Kent, David Walter Nouse, Arlen Wayne Cohen, Jacob Clark Lawn, Vernon Eugene Lale Jr., Austin Clifford Lane, Gary Alvin Larson, Donald Wayne Latman,
Eugene Louis Lavoie, Jr., Jimmy Francis Lehman, Ricky Norman Lauder, Roy Eugene Lynn, Bradley Thomas Mace, Willie Erskine Madden, Thomas John Malone, Leo Joseph Mangold, Morris Ralph McBride, Demetrius Cortez McCall, Thomas Weller McCarthy, Joseph Byron McCartney, Darrell Eugene McCartney, Jean Opry Merriweather, Ronald Lee Mikesell, Peter Mitchell, Dean Ward Mowring, William Lewis Moore, Randy Roy Mueller, Stephen Brian Murray, Harold Earl Musselman, Donald A. Nahoodle Jr., George Herbert Nesselrod, William Charles Ninow, Henry Norfleet Jr., David Robert Ogle, Loomis Oglesby III, Kenneth Lyndall Oldham, George Thomas Olson, Domingo Ortez, Michael Raymond Padilla, Gary Teofilio Padilla, Dwayne Carl Papke Jr., David C. Papesh, Richard Lewis Park, Jimmy Edward Parker, Richard Victor Pollack, Daniel L. Penson, Harmon Wayne Perry, Eddie Lee Pleasant, John Lionel Pratt, Charles Wayne Ratter, William Thomas Rector Jr., M. Raymond Reeves, Harold Edward Rakow, Norman A. Renfro, Floyd Whitley Richardson, Samuel Dewey Ryder, Jr., Paul William Riley, George Ray Robinson, Charles Donald Roby, Joe G. Rodriguez, Jr., Charles Gregory Ross, Donald Lee Rudd, Walter William Rudolph, Thomas Peter Rousseau, Angel Porfir Saez Ramirez, Michael Douglas Sams, Lane Michael Santos, William John Schaaf, Thomas Koenig Schaefer, Joseph Smitch Jr., Gerald Wayne Schultz, Peter John Schultz,
William Henry Scott, Vernon Elbert Scott, Harry Baton Seeds III, David Andrew Sieber, Paul Anthony Sgambati, Ray Thomas Sham Jr., Ronald James Shear, Delbert Leo Singler Jr., James Arthur Skiles, William Mark Smith, Ronald C. Smith, Robert Barry Smith, Thomas F. Smith Jr., Dale Marvin Snyder, Richard Charles Spencer, Alfred William Spire, John Raymond Stalter, William Clyde Stinson Jr., Lester Ray Stone Jr., Lawrence Strack, George T. Swimer, John Phillips Talon, Dennis Lee Talkington, Philip Joseph Taylor, Wayne Winston Teeple, Ronald Charles Takes, Bruce Wayne Thompson, Dennis U. Thompson, Glenn Allen Tompkins, John Willard Vansant, Ronald J. Vandenberg, Sylvester Joe Vasquez, Rodrigo Velasquez Feliciano Jr., Jared Bruce Walding, William Owen Walters, Ernest Shelby Ward, Oliver Kenneth Webb, John Thomas Welshin, George Preston White, James Earl Williams, Roger Ralph Williams, Alfred Mack Wilson, Herbert Wilson Jr., Willard Alvin Wimmer, Ray Houston Woods, George Kent Yoakum, Randall Lee Young.